Good evening, all. I have a slight technical difficulty I am fixing right now. All right, let's do this. And it's not bringing you in. What's going on? The joys of technical issues. Oh, there we go. All right, thank you for your patience. I apologize. We were having some technical hurdles. Good evening. I'm Dustin, also known as Rope Aficionado, and welcome to the Dominance Dialogue. This is the podcast where we explore the psychology, the sociology, and the cultural aspects of BDSM. In tonight's episode, Truth and Torment, Consensual Interrogation, we bring on SirGuy. SirGuy, thank you for coming with. Would you mind introducing yourself and a little bit about your experience?
Okay, so I'm known as SirGuy. I'm a Leatherman. I'm a covered master. I've been in the lifestyle for close to a quarter century now, I believe. I have experience in emergency medical services. I'm a 9/11 first responder. I'm a former police officer. I've been an educator for close to 20 years in the lifestyle. Outside the lifestyle, I've also been an educator. I have a tendency to lean toward the more cerebral parts of BDSM, and part of that is interrogation. Though I do have a host of other things I do. I've won awards in the lifestyle as an educator from MAsT International, from the Master Slave Conference, etc. But essentially, my goal is to educate, help people come to a better understanding of various elements of BDSM. I also do things specifically geared toward the BIPOC community, because they're also a marginalized community within the marginalized community, and discussing that history as well. So that's the brief thing. I have a resume that's extensive, but we don't have time to read all that stuff and get into what we're doing, and I don't like to blow my own horn. So.
Oh, that's what this is. I mean, this is all about you, right? And your experience. So you could toot your own horn a little bit. I mean, 25 years experience, that's a lot. Actually, off the air, we were sharing some war stories, if you will, right? From the other days.
Right.
And, you know, I'll go ahead and bring a little bit of that conversation in here because I do see value to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So some people don't know that circa 2004, 2007-ish, between that era, I was in a rough space. And I thought I was a really bad human because I had these very bad desires. And then I came across what was known as the State, and it was a group of individuals by the name of Flag, Soul Hunter, and Cersei. I believe there was a couple others associated. I apologize, I don't remember everyone's name. Nonetheless, they brought acceptance to myself, or helped me find acceptance in myself because of having conversations like we're going to have tonight. SirGuy, he informed me that the first, I believe the first class, was it, that you attended on interrogation?
Yeah, right. The first interrogation workshop that I attended was by Flag and Soul Hunter. Back in those days, TEST, the Eulenspiegel Society, they used to have 2 classes a week, and we used to do one workshop, a 3-hour workshop per month. And wanting to absorb as much as possible, I tried to hit all the meetings and all the workshops. This particular workshop was on interrogation, and I had never done interrogation before as a kink. I kind of done it professionally, but never as a kink. When we started that workshop, it seemed to be a natural thing for me. There were elements of it that I learned. I learned a lot in that 3-hour span, but it was something that I took to quite quickly, because the mental aspects of things appeals to me a lot, and their instruction and their insight into the mental aspect of this type of play was something that was intriguing, and it stirred something within me. So as a result of that, I started to explore it more on my own, investigate it more on my own, research it more on my own, and I've come to the point where I actually educate on interrogation play and interrogation scenes now.
16 years later, right? It sounds like your mic is rubbing against your shirt. Is there a clip or anything that we can possibly pin it so it doesn't move as much?
I'll see what I can do.
It's just going to be such a great conversation. I'd like to get the best audio we can.
I understand. Give me one moment.
It'd probably make the most sense to put the clip close to the mic, like up near your shirt collar, probably.
All right. Okay.
Because that's what it sounds like on my end, is it that the mic's rubbing on your shirt collar. So while he's adjusting his mic, you know, we could dive in a little bit about, you know, Flag and some of his teachings, and you know, to some level, I hope that I may be able to help carry on some of his legacy, and that is diving into these deeper topics, not just how we do it, but why we do it. So it already sounds much better. Great. Thank you.
Good.
All right. So where were we? We were talking about Flag, reminiscing a little bit. You stumbled into one of their workshops, and that was your first interrogation workshop.
Yes, it was my first workshop. And they started to go through the various elements of crafting an interrogation scene, particularly the psychological elements of it. So many people who enter into BDSM get into the more physical things, and most of the things that people think about when they talk about BDSM are the more physical things, you know, impact play and those type of things. And they can be a part of an interrogation scene. But the idea is that this is part of a psychological thing. It's what many people call a mind fuck. When you're able to utilize that person's mind against themselves. And that's something I always found to be intriguing. Psychological aspect of things, delving deep into the person's mind is something that I always found to be attractive even before I came into the lifestyle. So coming into the lifestyle and then finding something, an avenue like interrogation, was very attractive and intriguing to me.
I believe there's a saying that Flag used to say was, we want to, we will. So we have to learn how to do it ethically, right? Or something along those lines. There's that desire, there's that attraction. Right. I believe, according to Wikipedia, the #1 sexual fantasy across the spectrum of all humans, to my knowledge, is what we call consent, non-consent. Mm-hmm. Well, why? There's many reasons, and that's not what this topic is about, but we have these dark desires. And once again, like we were discussing off air, if we don't have these open discussions, then how can people enact their terrible will safely with the people that they love and care about?
Well, definitely.
Safer,
right.
Yes.
One of the issues that I found, and we talked about this earlier, with all kinds of prejudice, is a lack of knowledge. It's ignorance. Once we start to peel back the onion, once we start to let people know that these things can be done in a safer manner because they have more knowledge, it becomes less taboo, less scary for them. We don't want to take all of the fear out of this, because fear is a part of what this is. It's a part of the excitement of this, but at the same time, the prejudice against it, the resistance to exploring that part of ourselves starts to dissipate once we realize that it's basically desires that many of us already have. So being able to recognize those desires, to be able to, after having recognized them, be able to control them because we can do things ethically, because we know what we're doing, because we've studied how to do these things properly. That takes away that fear, that abject fear, that prejudice against things. It makes it more palatable for us, and therefore better for us to be able to explore in a manner that is, as we brought out, ethical and consensual.
Absolutely. So I think before we get too far into this discussion, for the sake of this discussion specifically, we need to define what consensual interrogation is. So my exact question was, what exactly is consensual interrogation in your own words?
In my own words, I believe that consensual interrogation is an agreement between two or how many other people are involved in the scene to do a role play type scene that involves the interrogation scenario. Within that scenario, you explore both physical and psychological things in order to bring about a pleasurable experience for all the people involved. It can involve, it can be very complicated, or it can be very simple. It can start with things like abduction and rendition and, you know, sensory deprivation and all these type of things, or it can just be a one-on-one with a questioning. It runs the gamut, but the idea is that this is a discussed procedure where every detail doesn't have to be negotiated. However, the overall arc of the play is negotiated, and the parameters are set, and we don't violate those parameters. But at the same time, it incorporates within it fear play and psychological play and all these other things that can heighten the excitement of the scene.
We touched on a lot there. So one of my concise thoughts that and this is not my thought, you may actually, you might be one of the few people that actually know this thought. It's about the person, not the process. Right?
Exactly.
And that is something that has been monumental for me to enact my will. My will, I don't really care about the process, to be honest. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I get all lost. I want to like throw someone in the trunk, but then I forget to clean out the trunk. So the process is ruined, and now I got to focus back on the person. So I just always forget about the process. And that's actually a true story. I believe I shared it before, and I'll give it a short synopsis of it. A few years ago, I planned a consensual abduction scene. I planned to borrow a good friend's car, to use their car to add to the role play. And lo and behold, when I went to put my willing participant into the trunk, their trunk was full of a spare tire and so on and so forth. And for me, someone that's on the has Asperger on the autism spectrum, it made my whole brain just blew up because I was so focused on the process, right?
Well, I think that's one of the issues that exist, not just in this type of scene, but in many other scenes. I think that a lot of people forget that any of the scenes that we do, but particularly things like this, are about the people in them. They focus on the people in them. They're not about the show. Too much of what it is that we do is, to many people, performance art. And what it actually is a connection between the people in that scene. And so when you're dealing with something psychological, that connection can be more intense. And so the important thing from my standpoint is the connection between the people, you know, the getting them to connect on the variety of levels, from the psychological to the physical. I think that's the thing about this particular type of scene that is key. And I think that a lot of people in general forget about that, that it's not about, like you said, the process, but about the people. It's about the connection.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And from my perspective, like even me, you know, playing in this realm for 15-ish years, I still always try to remember that acronym KISS. Keep it simple, stupid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't focus on all the process, the intricacies, what toys I'm going to use, what rope, where's the duct tape, so on and so forth. Focus on the person. And for me, a lot of it is about the emotional state that I'm trying to invoke in this person or provoke from this person.
Yes, that's true. And that's why it's important to know that person. This is supposed to be experienced between the people involved in that scene. So that means that it has to motivate and excite and incite everyone in that scene, not people on the periphery, not those who might happen to be observing it, but those people in that scene. So beyond, you know, if you have a script, well, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that. What happens is you lose sight of the person.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you may, yeah, true, you may have certain things in mind you may want to do, but a lot of what we do in these type of things are based upon the reaction of the individual with whom we're partnered.
Mm-hmm.
And so while we may have a veritable plethora, a virtual cornucopia of things in mind that we may want to do, when we connect with them, they may take us down a particular path that may not have been the one we may originally had envisioned. Mm-hmm. And by doing so, you strengthen that connection, and you can intensify that particular scene because you're focused, again, like you said, on the person and not the process. And that's where the connection, and that's where that scene becomes vibrant, because you're dealing with that person and the things that you can get from that person in the context of the scene.
And honestly, a submissive's tongue's good for three things, and the third is a shovel. If you give them the time and the opportunity, they'll dig themselves a grave, right? And at the end of the day, when it comes to this interrogation or some of this edge play, the psychological play, the mental play, you have to use the information that you get from your submissive or your bottom in this scene, right? Just like SirGuy stated, for me, probably one of the best pieces, two best pieces of advice I can give you: don't lie. Cardinal rule number one, do not lie. You can create an environment that's conducive to your victim, your bottom, your slave, your sub, whatever you want, that for them to, you can create number one rule, don't lie, but you can create an environment where the bottom can lie to themselves, but you cannot lie to them, in my opinion. Rule number two, know your person. The more you know, the better decisions you'll make. It does not take time, it takes information. And
well, that's true.
Oh,
no,
I think,
especially when you talk about not lying, okay? You're playing in the person's mind. So you can be as truthful as ever, but their mind, based upon the things that you do and the things that you say, can cause them to lie to themselves. And that's part of the intricacy of this type of play.
Absolutely. And for me, personally, that's one of the things that draws me to this type of play. I've been suspending humans since add the 2, carry the 3, subtract the 4, since 2008-ish. So there's still a lot to suspension to me. But if you look at it, I do the same ties, but the depth is the person, the emotions, the feelings. I've framed it as a genre. Like, what do you want? Are we going to have a horror movie tonight, please? Right? Is it going to be a thriller? Right? What are we doing here? Or is it going to be a romance? Well, I'm not big into the romance movies, but occasionally maybe I could be. And something that I personally have found interesting as I've really reflected on my dark side, the facet of Dustin that's just fucking evil, right? Why do I have this desire? I still don't know, but I have sussed out a lot of things about it, specifically thanks to Soul Hunter. And he asked me what prevented me from doing these things. I said, mostly the law. I got a fundamental fear of the prison system, as most people do. And that worked for a while. And then a few years later, as me and Soul Hunter got to know each other better and possibly even become friends, he asked me, well, what if the law wasn't involved? What if there was anarchy? What would you do? I believe my exact response was, fuck you. Because he knew me, and he knew he just opened up a dark hole in me that I really needed to look in the mirror. And it took me about 3 days to really reflect on that. That would I not enact these terrible thoughts if there was no fear of the prison system? And I came back to him and I said, Soul Hunter, I said, prison's not what stops me. The only thing that stops me is me, period. And I've determined that I don't like to cause harm. More specifically, I don't even like to hurt people I don't know. It's really weird. I really only want to hurt the people that I love and care about with consent. But it took a long time looking in the mirror and asking myself some very hard questions and thankfully having some wonderful humans around me that were able to help me suss out some of my desire and where the intentions came from.
Well, that's an important thing to understand that. For me, it was discovering my sadism. I grew up in a very fundamentally religious household. I also grew up with a certain sense about violence, domestic violence, or violence toward women under any circumstances. So even coming into the lifestyle, basically initially my interest was in the hierarchical relationships. But then as I got more involved and the people with whom I was involved, themes and play got more involved. And I started to realize that there was an element of sadism within me. And I often speak of the idea of being afraid to open the door to the cage because I don't know what will come out. Having more and more knowledge, both of the process, but of myself, and being able to connect with someone else who was able to get from me what they want from me in this reciprocal type of relationship, I've been able to understand the sadism within me. I think that all of us have some elements of that. I think that we exist on a spectrum, and that sometimes we can stay on one end of the spectrum, or we can fluctuate on that spectrum based upon the circumstances, based upon the time, based upon the person that we're with, based upon the energy that's being given off. And it may take us to a place that we haven't been before. Being able to recognize that, to admit that, to acknowledge that, helps us from becoming a danger. It helps us to be able to harness that energy. That whole coda about using your power for good and not evil. But using it for some evil, but not too much evil, not excessive evil. And I think that's a part of the thing is it's, what's the expression about not being, if you don't have the propensity for violence, then you're never going to be a threat. You can't say I'm not a threat because you never were if you don't have that propensity. It's having that propensity for violence and being able to control that. That makes you formidable. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of us try to avoid thinking about, because we've been so conditioned that even the thought of it is a bad thing. Even though our society allows it, whether it's in warfare, whether it's in policing, whether it's in all these other things, when it's good for them. So being able to discover how to harness it when it's good for us in a positive way, in a way that can be arousing, in a way that can be stimulating, it's something that it takes a sort of emotional maturity to come to, but it's something that needs to be explored so you can come to that realization. And I think that this is one of the reasons why a play like this, when done properly, is important, because it allows the people on both sides of that flash, whether they're top or bottom, to explore that sadistic, masochistic element that exists within our everyday lives.
Well, it's a lot of freedom. For me personally, from my side, like, I'm going to steal some other person's words and I'll give them credit. It comes from Radical Ecstasy, Easton and Hardy, one of my favorite books. But in those moments, it's nothing but a being that's giving hurt and a being that's getting hurt. And nothing else in the world matters. And so often we walk around this world and we get hurt, but we didn't agree to it. Right? And there's other times for me where I want to hurt, right? That's kind of the nature of me. But I don't want to hurt random people, remember? Like, there's a freedom when my girl comes up to me and says, "Sir, please give me what you have to release," right? Let me share your pain. Yum, right?
With many people, that's that primal urge. You know, there are people who say they're primal. It's that animalistic thing that we all have within us. It's a thing that many of us harness consciously, but most of us harness subconsciously, because we've been geared societally that, you know, even having those type of feelings are wrong. But when we deal with the fact that we are essentially animals, we're going to have some type of animalistic tendencies or views or desires. But it's the intellect, you know, and the ethics and that aspect of us, the ability to think, that allows us to harness those things or to channel those things in a way that's not hurtful, well, not harmful, where it's not damaging, but where it can be stimulating and invigorating and even soothing. It can even be calming, to be able to release that energy or to absorb that energy, because we're living in a society now that can be chaotic. We're living in a society now that is constantly exerting stresses on us. So when we have a positive way to exert those things, to share those things, to absorb those things in that transaction, it can be calming, it can be soothing, it can give us peace. So being able to recognize that and be able to utilize that in a positive way, consensually and ethically, is a good thing.
So many thoughts. I want to get some of my thoughts on paper. But we have an audience question that I want to bring in, and I'm actually glad that it was brought up because it's an important question. I'll let you answer it first while I collect my thoughts, if you don't mind. The question from the audience is, what advice can you give for tops to maintain control and not to go too far or to get sucked into the scene itself?
For me, okay, it's responsibility. I understand that I'm running this thing. I understand that I'm responsible for my actions and for the person in my charge, in the framework of that scene. When I think about that, I know that I have to be cognizant. I have to be in tune with what's going on. I can't allow myself to be so far gone that I lose track of what's happening. So for me, it's that sense of responsibility. Only once during the course of my doing these things have I felt that I had lost control. And my partner at the time was fine with it while it happened. In fact, she had said, "Oh, this is the best scene we have ever had. I've never felt this way with you before." And I said, "That's great. Enjoy it, because it's never going to happen again." Because my concern was, if I'm not in control of it, then who is? Right? If I can't regulate this, then who will? This person's put themselves in my hands. They've trusted me. Why would I put myself in a position to violate that trust? And so there's a song, I think by Temptation, David Ruffin, but part of it said, "I'd rather leave you holding on than pushing me away. I'd rather you want more than I gave you too much and now we'll have nothing else." So I can always save it for the next time, give you a little bit more the next time, and a little bit more the next time. But it's all about trying myself to keep in mind what my goal is and the fact that I'm responsible. And that's the thing, and responsibility and accountability are things that a lot of people either don't think about or they don't take on. And if you're going to be a top in the scene, I mean, yes, we all have personal responsibility, don't get me wrong. But when you're in a position of control, when you can start or stop, when you can go farther and not meet any resistance, it's up to us to be responsible about that. And so for me, I'm very cognizant of that. And like I said, I'd rather leave them wanting more than to give them too much and then lose everything.
So I have to say, I love that statement of, if I am not in control, who is? Wow, that's power. I might have to borrow that at some point, right? I will make sure to credit you. My thoughts on this, honestly, they parallel a lot of your thoughts. My number one rule when it comes to a lot of this, any kind of interaction with another person, is to want more than want less. It's easy to want more. It's impossible to want less, right? I mean, well, I guess you can want it. You'll just never get it usually. So something that was really important for me, because I genuinely shared serious concerns about getting lost into the scene, was to have a clear beginning, a clear middle, and a clear end. But there's more to it. I'm going to pull back my curtain real quick, so any bottoms that ever played with me know my tricks now, I guess. I will set alarms, right? So just an example per se, from the start of the scene, after that, 10 minutes. That's going to be my first ramp up. 15 minutes, my second ramp up. 30 minutes, my third ramp up. My fourth, or whatever. And then, but at the end, the big thing is to have a final alarm to end the scene. An indicator for me. So what I have done in the past is all of those alarms are just vibrate. The bottom has no idea. The last alarm is just a beep, just a single beep. Most phones, you can pick what type of alarm. But it's the only one that is audible. It is different. And it breaks me out of the scene, out of the headspace for a second. It helps me stay grounded. It keeps my feet on the ground so I don't float and go tickle the toes of angels, right? And every 10 minutes or so, my pocket vibrates and reminds me that this is a scene. And sometimes I might be like, oh crap, was this the third vibration or the fourth vibration? It doesn't matter, because then comes the beep. And that's the one that really, really matters. Furthermore, whenever negotiating for a scene like this, I recommend negotiating beginning, middle, and end. How's it going to begin? We don't need to go detailed processes, but it's going to begin on a day between now and 14 days. I'm going to come up to you. I'm going to say this exact phrase, and that is the beginning. The middle is I'm going to invoke dread, because I like dread. Dread is anticipation's evil little cousin or something, twin maybe. Much better than fear, if you ask me. Fear is, we have the ability to overcome fear. Dread, it's a lot harder to overcome and much more sustainable. The end is when I tell you how good you've done for me, how well you've served me, how pleased I am with you. The end is when we go to the shower and wash each other and reconnect. The end is when we get water and snacks, however it may be. But for me, that has, and still to this day, is really important, because I need that separation. I need to come back to being Dustin. I don't need to be the bad daddy, the kidnapper, the whatever, the ghost mass killer, whatever, right? I need to be Dustin. And it's very, very important for me as a human to have that end.
You see, that's an important thing. Recognizing yourself is really key to this, because, you know, the way you describe your process is very interesting, especially when you consider if you're in a dungeon, you're in a dark space or whatever, your reminders are something that work, you know, that remind you, and the other person may not have to come out of where they are to have those reminders. And so, but that's because you know you. Okay, you know what you need. And I think that sometimes in this transaction, some of us are so concerned with what the other person is getting that we forget about what is it that I need. You know, when you talk about your end includes what many people will consider aftercare, which is very, very important. But it's not, and I like that the fact you said us taking the shower, because you indicated that aftercare is for both people. It's not just for the person who was on the receiving end, okay? But the person who was on the giving end needs aftercare too. They need to recover too. And so making sure that your methodology, especially with something like interrogation, which can be draining psychologically for everyone involved, making sure that there's aftercare for everyone is a very important element of that.
Absolutely. It's dark waters, right? We don't know how deep it is, how far it is, until we explore it. And for me, it's always been important to remember that this is a shared experience, that we came in as two humans and we have to come out as two humans. So we have a bunch of audience questions now, and we're only asked one of my official questions. So I'm going to speed things up a little bit, just so we can try to get some in. But we've already talked. It sounds like we're going to need to bring you back on, and we'll have to do a second.
Oh, well.
So I think the first question that makes sense from the audience to ask, it's not necessarily in order, but it's more in line with what we're discussing. But the question is, how does SirGuy set up an interrogation scene?
I start off by doing research. If it's someone, I don't do pickup play anymore, but I've done things where I've had things requested, scenes requested. So I do research on the person. For example, FetLife Profiles, you know, that has, usually has a little a blurb about the person, what they're into. You look at their fetishes. You look at the groups that they're in. It can tell a lot, especially all the people who live in Antarctica. They're in Antarctica, but all their groups are in Boston. That's a hell of a travel that you do. You look at the pictures, and the pictures tell a lot about how they want to present themselves to people. And so it starts with that. Then it goes with a conversation. I always, in whatever type of scene I'm doing, I'm interested in the person's physical and mental health. We all have experienced traumas in our lives, and they affect us in different ways. So I need to know what's off limits. I need to know what they have issues with. I need to know, we need to establish parameters. So that comes with a conversation. And again, part of interrogation, a scene, is for them not to know everything that's going to happen. But to get an idea what parameters it is that you can work within, what things are dangerous for them, what things are triggering to them, and to work away from those things. We mentioned earlier how trust is important, how not lying to them is important. So even in the course of a scene, let's say they have an aversion to golden showers. I wouldn't want to pretend, that this water bottle that I'm squirting on them while they're blindfolded is me peeing on them, because in their minds, I violated their trust. So I can't later on say, oh, ha, 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 it's not that. The time it was happening, that's what they believed it was. So there's a certain ethical thing involved with that too. So knowing these things, knowing those parameters before I even start to set up the scene is important to me. I usually begin a scene with some type of psychological thing. It may be sensory deprivation. It may be you stripping them down from what they were wearing and giving them a T-shirt with a number on it, and then only referring to them by that number and making sure they only understand that number. And if I call them by their name and they respond instead of responding to the number, then there's a recourse. There's something that happens to them because they've forgotten who they are. Sometimes it's the stripping of them that takes away the identity. I do classes on uniform play as well. And one of the things about uniforms is that it gives people an identity. Uniform comes from the Latin uniformis, meaning having one form. So putting everyone in a uniform takes away their individuality, takes away their identity. We dress the way that we do because it expresses who we are. It expresses something about ourselves. You take that away from a person, okay, and now you've removed a layer. You've taken some of their personality. Sometimes putting a hood on them is a thing that happens to me. Why? Not only does it take away some of their senses, but it also dehumanizes them to the person doing the interrogation. I'm not looking at a person, I'm looking at a face. This is a hooded individual. So then it allows you more leeway when you're dealing with certain aspects of that play. I've done things in the beginning where it's like a bait and switch thing. I take out a bunch of tools and implements of ass destruction, and they see these things being laid out, and then I blindfold them. And I may never use any of those things I've laid out on the table. But in their minds, they've seen them, and they're waiting to see, okay, he's going to use one of these things eventually. Which one is it? And so it starts off with this that mindset, and then it goes from there. It may be, before I even ask a question, I'm setting up a mindset. I'm setting up a scenario that where they realize that they are no longer in control, and they're anticipating what might happen next. And I'm allowing them to use their minds against themselves. And the things that they think of are probably much worse than I'm going to think of for them. So that's the foundation of it. That's how I started off. And then where we go from there often depends upon what information they give me when I start asking my questions, or how they react to me when I start doing things. Sometimes just their being uneasy makes it easier for me. because they I don't have to touch them. I don't have to, because they're so on edge from all the other things, that it gives me a power that that they inevitably have to submit to. So along those lines, like I said, I have that type of thing as the beginning. I use the information that I receive both in my conversations with them and what I see on their website, and in some of the questions I ask in my question. I ask questions so that I can make sure that what I do is as safe as possible with these individuals. So with this information that I've gotten from them, I can utilize that during the course of the interrogation. And it can take one course or another, and it can even change based upon how they answer me. Just an example, I had a scene where I had two people that were being interrogated. So with one, I start to punish them when they lied to me. No, I punish the next person for every lie that this person told me. Okay. So then when I came to this person deliberately lied so that I could punish the other person because of what they had endured. This is the thing where I played them against each other. So this is something that developed. It wasn't something that was planned, but it was something that was observed, and then we utilized that.
No, I love all that. I think, like, I'll keep my answer really short, and it kind of summarizes most of your answer, and I've already said it. Information. You know, I didn't say it very tactfully, but create an environment that's safe for them to communicate with you, and they will tell you everything you need to know.
True.
In my opinion. If you create that environment, they'll write your instruction manual. So the next audience question we're going to go in, it's great because it covers some of my later questions. Right. And it's perfect for following up this question because you touched on mental health. So the question from the audience is, how do you, and I appreciate, try to ensure your bottom is mentally healthy enough to handle the scene? What type of questions do you ask to know if they will be able to handle the scene rather than cause them some kind of mental injury?
Here's the thing. We talk about, I require honesty from the people that I do any scene with, right? And I impose upon them the idea that they must be honest and forthcoming in order for us both to have an enjoyable experience. Don't worry about, well, if I say this is not going to happen, because otherwise it can create a situation whereby damage can be done, both to them physically or psychologically, and to me and my reputation. So I do ask questions about mental health issues. I'm direct about that. You know, like I said, I was an emergency medical technician. You know, asking questions about a person's health and their past history is something that I've always done. I don't necessarily need you to give me your diagnosis and tell me what medications you're taking, but I need to know, do you have some issues? What are those issues about? What are those issues surrounding? What has happened in your past that if I touch this, will you react a certain way? And I expect that them to be honest with me and to tell me those things. They'll tell me how to steer clear of things. Now, of course, even with that information, things can happen. You know, you can do something 99 times and the 100th time something happens. And it's an example I use all the time. It was a partner of mine, and it had nothing to do with a scene. We were having vanilla sex. And I just positioned her legs in a certain way that I had done before. But this particular time, it triggered a sexual assault that she had endured. Because I'm responsible, I saw her react in a way that was unusual. I stopped and I realized she was someplace else, and I brought her back to that, to where we actually were and who she was with. And that's the same type of thing, and type of environment, type of trust I want to create when I'm doing an interrogation scene. And it's exactly why I don't do it as pickup anymore, because I need to know the person that I'm with. I need to know that A, what they're about, and B, that I can trust that they're going to be honest with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then know enough about them that if something does go off, I can do what is necessary, provide what is necessary to bring them back to a safe space. So it's a discussion that has to be had, and it has to be an honest discussion. They have to understand the seriousness of it.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you on the not doing pickup play when it comes to this stuff. I mean, to this point where I'm at in my journey, I don't really have a strong desire to do pickup play in any facet, whether it's interrogation or rope. It's not for me. I enjoy exploring the depth of connection.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my girl, she's been waiting almost a year for some of the stuff we're talking about, and I imagine that she's listening to now, and she's gonna be more wanting it, and she's still gonna be patient because I'm still gathering knowledge. She just didn't realize that until this moment, but she should have known that. She knows me well enough, right? Information makes good decisions. So I'm going to go to one of my questions before I go to the next audience questions, because I think it makes the most sense, since we're talking about like mental health and emotional states that we can invoke in interrogation. So I'm actually going to reframe it a little bit. Interrogation play can be emotionally taxing. How do you recommend that participants recover?
I think the best way to recover is to fall into each other. You described how you do it. It's that caress at the end. It's that leaning on each other at the end. It's providing for each other when it's done. Letting that person know that they did a good job. Letting that person know that whatever happened in the scene was the scene, but now this is us now. That was a really good thing that happened, and let's enjoy each other as we come down from this together. Whatever it takes for us. I mean, everybody has their thing. I like physical contact. Physical contact works for me because there's so much you can tell by a person's skin temperature, the texture of the skin, whether they have goosebumps, whether they're diaphoretic or sweating profusely. All these things can tell you, they cool. All these things can tell you things about them physically that are connected to their emotional state. And sometimes it's just that touch, that hug, that bringing them in where your hearts are next to each other that can help to bring the scene to a nice, calm conclusion. Having, and interrogation scenes can be intense. They can last for a long period of time. So making sure that you have water, if juices if necessary. Sometimes people may have diabetic or be borderline diabetic. So having something to sustain them afterward. Sometimes, I say a lot with people of color, our skin gets ashen. So sometimes just having some oil or lotion to rub and soothe the body helps bring that down and calm and soothe. It's important that we have that period because interrogation can be really intense. It can really peak and be very emotionally draining. To recognize that it can be draining on both sides of that is important. So having the capacity, and if you don't feel that you can do that to each other physically, then being able to provide a third or somebody like that that's going to be able to assist with that to make sure that you come back to that point of peace and calm in an effective way, I think is important.
Yeah, I think like you really just nailed it. Like my words on a lot of what you said is reconnect as human to human. And that's what's really important for me. And that, like you said, physical touch, that's really important for me too. For me as a top in these types of scenarios, it's important for me to know that I'm not a monster, that not that you enjoyed it, but you consented to it, you agreed to it, and I'll say maybe it was fulfilling. But I personally don't think a lot of what we do is enjoyable. I don't even know if I enjoy interrogating people. That word alone has some problems for me, but I don't want to go into that. I receive fulfillment from interrogating people, but I don't necessarily enjoy it, especially some of the things that it brings out of myself. I definitely don't enjoy those. Is it fulfilling? Is it healing? Is it freeing? Yes. Not necessarily enjoyable. And I think that, like, the biggest thing that we could probably take out of most of this discussion is that it is about two humans, and we need to remember that we're going in as humans, we're coming out as humans. Another thing I would recommend: don't do this on a Sunday if you got to work on a Monday. Oh, yeah. Because if your boss raises their voice to you, I don't care who you are, what gender, it doesn't matter. If you're a human and you just experience the scene, whether top or bottom, in my opinion, it doesn't matter. Your perception of reality is slightly altered for a non-zero amount of time. And that is something to consider.
Well, yeah, it's important that when you plan your interrogation scene, that you give it the amount of time that you need. You know, you can't, because you can't cram 2 hours worth of this into 45 minutes. You know, this is why I wouldn't recommend anything like this. Let's say in a dungeon space, like at a conference, where people are waiting to get into a certain area, and now you only got a certain amount of time to this, because this is something that's protracted. It takes some time. It takes time to develop. It takes time to build. It takes time to come back from it. And if you rip the door open too quickly, if you pull the person down too quickly, you can create a situation, you can damage a person. So the idea is, not to do that. And so time and managing time is a part of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. For many, many reasons. I don't think public space is the best space. Partly for me, it takes me out of the scene. There's too many uncontrollable variables where I just really can't. And outside influence on them as well. I find that a lot of times bottoms will struggle to reach the level of vulnerability that I'm hoping to achieve in front of a large audience.
Right.
And then also, just like you stated, you want to be respectful of other people inside of the event that you're at. One, being time in a certain space, but two, you don't know how your actions with your person may be perceived by another. And this is where for me, it's a little tricky. I don't personally want to go around to everybody in the dungeon or everybody at the event and say, hey, I'm going to do A, B, and C. Is that okay with you?
Right, exactly.
At some level, though, the level I like to play, that's my responsibility. I have a 2-foot rule. If you don't agree with it, if it doesn't add to your journey, look at your feet and walk away, right? But I have to be able to give the people the opportunity to walk away. That's my responsibility, which makes most public play.
Right. Yeah, exactly. A lot of things that was considered edge play, and interrogation is part of that, are things that may not be good for public consumption, because people, you may be able to control the people within your scene, but you can't control what happens outside of it. And someone may look at it and it may be triggering to them. Somebody may look at it and feel repulsed by it, even though the people in it are really involved in it and it's been negotiated and consented about, but to them it may affect their sensibilities, and they may respond in a way that could affect what you're doing. So yeah, it's one of the things that I tend to do privately. The only time you ever see me doing interrogation publicly is if I'm doing a presentation. And so even then, there's a restriction on it. I know I have a certain amount of time. I'm doing instruction, so it's not going to have the same level of intensity as if I'm doing an actual scene. But I can do enough that people get the gist of what a scene may entail.
So I have another one of my questions. I didn't forget about the last audience question. We're going to get back to you, but I want to stay on topic. And we're talking about like the emotional states and mental states. So my next question is going to be, how can partners prepare emotionally, mentally for this type of play?
Like I said, I think it's something that, you know, you have to discuss. I think you have to get on the same wavelength with things. There's a lot of trust involved, understanding, you know, and sometimes it takes building up to a level of trust, building up to a level of trust that you can, you know, do these things. You may not want to go all out in the beginning. You may want to just start with some of the more basic things and get them used to it, and then go a little further. I've had that happen with someone. We were in a relationship. She knew this was my thing. We talked about it, but she had never experienced it before. So I started off slow. She wanted me to do more. And I know I'm learning how you respond to me with these things. You can always mind something. That's the thing about the mind. There are things that we have that may have been buried, and it may take a certain thing that may bring those things out. You hear it. It happens sometimes with a song. All of a sudden, you hear a song, and it'll remind you of an event that happened in your childhood. Usually a pleasant event, but sometimes not so much. So, starting slow and building that trust, building that confidence, and the trust goes both ways. I have to trust that you're going to be honest in your reaction to me. You have to trust that I'm going to respect, you know, the limitations that you have set out. So I would advise not trying to go all out. I would advise doing things incrementally, seeing how they react to certain things, certain scenarios, certain touches, certain mental play, and then as you progress, you can do a little more and a little more and a little more. And that's also built, like I said, upon the foundation of trust. You can trust that they're going to be honest with you. They will trust your judgment more and allow more leeway as you progress.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like building a foundation. It doesn't happen in a day. It takes time to
and even after a strong foundation is laid,
to really. Oh, go ahead. Uh-oh, looks like we're breaking up a little bit
right now.
Yes. Yeah, looks like we're having a little bit of an internet hiccup. It's not the greatest weather here in central Ohio. We got snowstorms coming through currently.
Okay.
Something that I thought was really interesting. One of my previous guests, and he is a really good friend of mine, Dustin Becker, he introduced this idea to me that when he first plays with somebody, he's mostly impact top, right? That the very first time he plays with them, he negotiates to play till red. And I was like, interesting. And I asked him why. And it was ultimately because it creates trust between both parties. One, he can trust that his bottom will use their voice when they need to. Two, the bottom will know that when they do use their voice in an agreed upon manner, that he will respect it. And I really thought that was beautiful and thinking about it from that perspective, because ultimately that's what we need to do, is to build that trust. And I've never really thought about like playing to red to get trust, to knowing that my bottom can use their voice. I have plenty of experiences with bottoms that lose their voice. They go nonverbal in scene, not because they don't want to communicate. They're so lost in the space that it's hard for them to communicate, right?
Yeah,
oh,
I
man.
can see how that would work for him.
So much.
For me, It's the idea that today what may be read for them might not be read for them in another day. So, but I understand the concept of, okay, this is read for them today. They're using their voice today, and so it lets me know that they're doing that. It's just that I know that people, like I said, we're on a spectrum, and where I think I can go today might be different tomorrow.
Oh, 100%. 100%. This is where I'm really adamant that anybody that engages with me, that I'm very clear. I play off reaction, good, bad, or ugly. I really like the ugly stuff, but sometimes I just want to make you smile or laugh, right? But ultimately, I play off reaction, and I will play to reaction. So and this is where I'm usually pretty explicit, the reaction I want. I want you to cry for me. I want to break you tonight. I want you to, you to be my toy. I want whatever I want, right? It's very important for me to be clear about that. Not only for my partner, but for me, right? Because now I know, once again, I know where the end is. And if usually, like, I got a saying around here, suffering is service. And I love suffering. There's nothing more beautiful when a human suffers for me, from my perspective. And once again, when people know that I play off of reaction and I'm looking for the crying or whatever, that is another way for them to not only use their voice, but a way for them to communicate with me and to help bring an end to the scene, potentially.
I concur with you. I've always considered myself a reaction junkie. Even before I got into the lifestyle, I got off the reaction of the person I was with. So if I did a thing and they reacted a certain way, it's like, oh, I should do some more of this thing. And I've always been that way, and I brought that with me into this lifestyle. Trying different things, especially things that persons say, well, I've always wanted to do this, but I was always, had some trepidation about it, or I didn't trust another person enough to do this. I've had several people where it's like, I wouldn't do this with anybody else, but with you, because I trust you. And that's an important thing to me, and it's an important thing not to lose. So when they react to me in a positive way, then it's a reward to me, and it also stirs me on to stimulate them more, whether it's psychologically or physically, in order for them to get even more out of what we're doing.
So I'm going to circle way back early in my questions, because we just got so lost in some of this discussion that we didn't even talk about why are we drawn to it. I mean, some of my questions we've kind of answered in roundabout ways, but I don't think we really dived into what draws people to consensual interrogation.
I think that for a lot of people, it's the give and take. It's the back and forth. It's like, I'm trying to get something and you're trying not to give it to me. And that battle of wills is something that people like. They like to test that. They like to test their power. I like to believe that it's inevitable that you're going to capitulate to me. Okay. And even when I do my interrogation classes, I'll tell people, these are the ways where you can resist it. But the last thing I say is resistance is futile, because that's the way I feel about it. The idea of that battle that takes place, that battle of wills. I think that's what draws a lot of people to it. You know, we've all seen interrogation in one way or another growing up. You know, I'm a little older than most people that probably be here. So, you know, there was the old World War II movies where the fire was down and they're trying to get information from them, or the old police dramas where there was that, you know, the good cop, bad cop, and the hardened criminal didn't want to give up any information, and the way they were trying to get that information from them. Recently, we have more, you know, with the military and things like that. But it's that battle between, you know, I want something that you have, and I want you to give it to me. I think that's one of the draws of it. The fact that it's also a psychological thing. It doesn't have to be the physical component of it, but it's the psychological component of it. You can do this to me, you can do whatever, but I'm not going to give it up. It's like, I'm not going to do whatever, and you're still going to give it up. It's that battle of wills, and that I think attracts people to it, because it's less give take than a regular scene. It's like impact play. One person is doing the impact, one person is receiving the impact. Okay, so it's more transactional. But in interrogation, there's an interplay. And the person who is being interrogated still can retain some power to resist. So it's the idea of me wanting to be powerful enough to overcome that, and them wanting to retain their power to prevent that from happening. And that, I think, is one of the draws, one of the major draws when it comes down to interrogation play.
I completely agree. I mean, from my perspective, one of my biggest draws to it is that mental aspect, the mental exercise of, you know, what questions can I ask? What questions should I ask? How should I ask it? Thinking on my feet, you know, being that chess player that I like to think that I am, right? I really, really am attracted to just the intellectual side of things when it comes to interrogation. I mean, I will, like, I don't know if you are familiar, but people that know me know I love Trello. It's an application that organizes life. And I will essentially build out a card for an interrogation scene on like different types of questions. And then if I ask this question, where can it possibly lead? And for me, a lot of that, it's like, I think of the old quote that's always said Abraham Lincoln, but I think that's not actually Abraham Lincoln, where it says, if you give me 6 hours to cut down a tree, I'm going to spend the first 5 hours sharpening my axe. And for me, that, like, we're talking about that information gathering. Oh, I love it. My day job was research and development. Right. Oh, I love it. I love gathering information and then bringing it in and then making you wonder how I knew you had this dog foo-foo in third grade or something just ridiculous, right? I'd love to be able to confuse my bottom where I got the information, because wait, they didn't give it to me. And now with the power of AI, you guys better be careful.
Yeah, a lot of things you can craft that way.
Absolutely. I like I was talking about earlier, I have a ChatGPT assistant that has a lot of data from Flag, and I've dubbed it Flag Reborn, and it's going to help carry on his legacy, hopefully.
Right.
But yeah, no, AI is very, very powerful, but that's a whole topic I will get lost in. We don't want to talk about technology. So to get back onto consensual interrogation, my next question would be, how can someone explore this type of play if they're curious but unsure?
I think what they need to do, like I said, is edge play. So I don't advise people to jump into edge play without preparation. I think they should watch it first. You know, I think they should watch someone who knows how to do it first. Things like this where, you know, afterward you may be able to ask questions. I think that it's something that you should go into slowly, because not only do you have to consider your partner and how far you can go with them, you need to consider yourself, what level of skill that you have or how far you want to go. And this is an important thing, and something a lot of people don't think about. I was talking to someone once, and he was the top during an interrogation scene. And during the scene, he started to feel a certain way because he realized that his parents, his grandparents, had been concentration camp survivors. And the role that he was playing put him in mind of that, and it affected him psychologically during the course of that scene. So understanding that it's not just the bottom who may find triggers in a scene, the top may find triggers too. That's why it's best to proceed slowly, to take your time, to try not to get into the weightier parts of it, to kind of feel your way out. And again, so there's got to be trust on both sides of it. But it's not something that you would jump into. And again, like I said, talk to people who know, who have done it. Go to classes about it. Discover resources about it, and try to learn as much as possible before you dive into it. I don't think it's a thing that you should dive into, nor do I think any type of edge play is, especially psychological play, because a bruise can heal, a welt will go down, a scratch will heal, but if you damage a person psychologically, that stays with them. So you have to be very careful about how you jump into that.
I really appreciate how you conveyed that information. Like, bruises, they do heal, usually in a fairly consistent amount of time, right? 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of injury, for lack of better terminology, that can be caused in psychological or mental or emotional aspects of some of the stuff we do, we don't know the depth of the bruise. There's no physical thing that we can see on how much impact we've had on this person. And that makes it really tough. And going back, like circling way back about like, reconnecting as a human, something for me that's important, like impact scenes, I usually check in like the day after. Maybe 3 days after that, just to make sure. After that, usually, unless if I need to, there's not a whole lot of follow-up, I'll be honest, right? But that's my typical standard. 1 day follow-up, 3 day follow-up for just a standard impact type of scene, rope scene, and a bare bones interaction with Dustin, right? But when it comes to these darker interactions, once again, I utilize technology and use my calendar and check in with the person 1 day, 3 days, 14 days, and 30 days. And then depending, sometimes 60 and 90 days. Not only for them, but also for myself. Because sometimes I am carrying some of the bad, some of the self-judgment or the shame, and I need to reconnect with that person, right? Oof. So much stuff. All right, so now I want to get into some more.
Just to piggyback off of that.
Okay,
go ahead.
No, what do you got to piggyback off of it?
No, I'm just going to piggyback off of. Yeah, just really quickly. Soul Hunter and I were doing a demonstration, an interrogation demonstration. It was part of a charitable event we were doing, and one of the people who was bottoming for us was really deeply into their identity as a slave. And during the course of this interrogation, I asked a couple of questions, and she kind of faltered. And I said to her, well, maybe you're not quite the slave that you think you are. But I saw her expression change, and I realized she had taken that personally. I realized it was outside of a demonstration. And so for days after, I contacted her to let her know, listen, this was just a scene. It's not who you are. I know that who you are is, this is who you are as a slave. That this is a part of your identity. And what I said wasn't about you. It was about the scene. And it was something that had to be done because it was such an integral part of that person's personality and identity. And so that's why something as simple as a phrase like that can have deep effects. And so we have to be cognizant of that.
Absolutely. I'm glad you actually brought that up, because maybe like my 6th or 7th or 8th or 12th rule, I don't remember, somewhere down on my list of rules is don't intentionally attack someone's identity unless if it was explicitly discussed, right? Most people don't want to be called stupid. Most people don't want to have attraction to their body, whether they're small or big or purple or orange, unless if you negotiate that specific facet of a person's identity. From my experience, you need to stay clear of it. But even then, just like you brought up, it's not always intentional. I don't think you intended to attack this person's identity by no means. That seems well outside of your character based off of what I know. But this is how this person perceived it. And that's why, it is very important to know your victim, know your bottom, and take the responsibility. And I think it's commendable that, you followed up and continued to ensure that it was just a scene. It was not anything more than a scene, because some people can take that stuff really hard. I mean, we all want to be us.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And respected for who we are.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I've been saving one of the juicy questions for the end because I feel like we can get lost on this one. What are some techniques used during interrogation scenes to build intensity?
So one of the things I utilize is stress positions. These are things that put stress on the body, but while I'm doing that, I'm also doing mind games. So, for example, I don't know if people are familiar with the term of the duck walk. I have them squat down, interlock their fingers on top of their head, and make them walk in that position around the room. I'll hold on to their hands while they do that. And what that does is it puts a lot of stress on the muscles of the thighs. Okay. I may actually take a cane or a ruler and tap them on the inside of their thighs while I'm asking them questions. Okay. And if I get a question, I get an answer to a question that I may like, I'll bring them back up and let them stand up, take the tension off of their legs, and then I put them back down until they give me something else that I want. That's a way I build intensity. I use things like water, beyond waterboarding things, which I've done, but something as simple as having a glass of water and I flick the water in their face with my fingers while I'm talking to them. Disconcerting. I'm asking them questions they're trying to answer, and they're constantly getting hit in the face with water. And they're like, answer my question. I guess it's sensory deprivation is the thing. I have a couple of soundtracks on my Spotify list of things that I've culled together. It starts off with like meditative music. Yeah, it starts off with like meditative music. Something that's really calm and soothing, mindfulness type music. And then I'll go to screams or babies crying. And then it'll get mellow again. And then something severe come up again, shrieks, whatever, and it goes back and forth. I have those headphones on them. I have them blindfolded. They don't know where I'm at. While that's happening, I may touch them, strike them, or just touch them in a way because their attention is on what's going on. And so by doing those things, it keeps them disoriented. It keeps them offline. And it's easier for me to manipulate the situation with that. I can see how they react even when they're hooded or blindfolded to the music itself. Because and it gets to a point where whenever they hear the meditative music, they're expecting that something's going to break that again. And I let it go on long enough for them to think, okay, it's all right now, but it's not. So if those type of things I deal just with the psychological part of it before I even get into the physical part. I give them a number. When I take off the clothes, I give them a shirt and it has a number on it. I will strike them as many times as the number is, and they will have to call out 1 sir, 2 sir, 3 sir, 4 sir. And I vary the pace of it. I'll start slowly and then I'll do it really quickly, and they'll never be able to keep up. And so every time they are unable to keep up, I say, okay, no, you have to start all over again. And so then now they have to go back to the 1 sir, 2 sir, 3 sir, until they get to that number. And once we get to that number, I'll continue to hit them and have them repeat that number over and over again until I decide to stop. These are just some of the small things that I use in order to ramp up the tension in the scene, the intensity of the scene.
So, like, for me, you really hit on a couple big things. One I really liked was, keep them disoriented. And I kind of follow a very similar methodology. It's like the saying, never let them know your next move coming, right? So, like, when you're sitting there and you're explaining, like, oh, well,
right.
Make them to walk like a duck. When they give me an answer I like, I'll let them stand up, and then I'll put them back down. And until they give me another answer that I like, they don't get to stand back up. See, what I would even go further. Like, after 3 or 4 times of the reward for the answer that they think I like, the next time they give me an answer that they think I like, well, I don't like it now. And they don't get that reward. I really like to continue to create that confusion.
Oh yeah, I've done things similar to that where they tell me the truth and I tell them that they're lying to me. And then they'll relent because of the punishment, and so they'll lie to me, and then I'll punish them for lying to me. So you're lying to me now, you're lying to me then. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things I've always said is the truth is whatever I say it is. Okay. Your answer could be totally true, but if I don't think it's true, then it's not. And then if you renege, then you get punished for that.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and I think that's the beauty of what this is it's a game that can't be won, right? There's not necessarily information that you're trying to extract. So how you get to wherever the end is, it's not like the fate of the world or the United States or some country rests on if you get this information. It's just supposed to be fun.
Right. Exactly.
So that actually kind of brings...
Exactly.
Oh, go ahead. So that actually brings in an audience question that we have. And the first audience question, I didn't forget you. That's actually like my last question for the interview. So that's why I've been saving it. But the other audience question that we have is, what are the answers that you're looking for with your interrogations, and what types of things are the end goals?
It depends. I'm looking for whatever I want to be the answer to be. It can be truth. And as we just said, it could be a lie. It could be whatever I want it to be. That's the beauty of this thing. The idea is that you really don't know what answer I'm looking for. And I create the reality of it. I can tell you what I want that answer to be. And I can do what I need to do until I get that answer. And then even if I get that answer, I can decide, you know, that I don't like that answer anymore. That's the thing about it. What was the other part of that question?
They said, what types of things are the end goals?
Generally, the end goal has nothing to do with information. It's about them just capitulating that I'm in charge of this thing. Sometimes interrogation is not about information, it's about power. It's about accepting that you're not in control. It's about accepting that you have conceded to the other person. And that's just what it's about. And that is often the end goal. And once I get to that point where I feel that you have ceded enough, that you've capitulated enough, that you have surrendered enough, then we can end this. And we can get on with our aftercare. We get on with, you know, it doesn't have to be. Now, there are people who do play to a goal. You know, they'll give them a number, you know, a code or something like that, that will signal, almost like signaling red. It's like, okay, this is it. I've got to the extent to where I can go. I'm giving you this information. That's the universal code that this is done. There's so many different ways that you can work that. For me, it's more about the power than about the information. And you know, that's what drives me. And that's the beauty of this thing, and that you can craft these scenes the way that you want to appeal to what it is that you enjoy, but that your partner enjoys. It doesn't necessarily have to be a means to a particular end.
I completely agree. The end varies far and wide. I think we're kind of similar. That a lot of it is, I want that surrender. I want that to know without a doubt that I have the authority. I want it to be where you're going to tell me the sky is red and you believe it because I said it's true or something, right? I want unquestioned level of surrender, of helplessness, right? I have a great response for the answers because I've said it before. The answers don't matter, the emotions do. I could care less what answers you give me. I really don't. I care about the emotions that I'm like I said, I'm either invoking in you or provoking, right? And it goes back to, like, earlier in this discussion, we talked about it being about not being about the process, but about the person. And if you go back to thinking about the person, once again, the answers, they really don't matter, because it's not like we're trying to actually extract information. It's not like our partner is lying to us and we're trying to figure it out. Hopefully that's not the case, right? Because otherwise it's probably not going to be a good scene, right? So, like I said, the questions don't really matter. The answers really don't matter. But to give you kind of an idea of how I would go about it. So just for an example, we'll say that you went to a music event last week, right? For me, that's the core of my interrogation, is the music event. What you did, who you did it, and why you did it. And where it goes from there doesn't really matter. It could be based off the information you give. I need a core to focus around. And how I trip people up a lot
Right.
Is there anything that you need to tell me that happened at that music event last week? Oh, no? Huh. I was under the impression that there was something that you should tell me that happened at that music event. It's kind of weird that you don't know what you should tell me, but I do. Right? Going back into the process, or the person. The person. It doesn't matter the questions, it doesn't matter the answers. Creating that dread, that emotion,
Exactly.
that helplessness, surrender, however you want to frame it. Wow. All right. So we're almost at 2 hours. I have more questions now than I did at the beginning, which is great. To be clear, more questions for myself, not necessarily for you. I have more questions to ask myself. Even after exploring this for so long, you've definitely promoted some thought. And I do appreciate that. I'll go ahead and give you a moment. I'll honk your horn for a second if you don't mind. I really appreciate you coming on the show and having this conversation with me. Because, like I brought up earlier, if I never heard Flag and Soul Hunter speaking, I would be in a lot different place. And it's not easy to have these type of conversations. It opens us up for a lot of judgment, persecution, and so on and so forth. But we really, really need to have them. And I'm so thankful that I was able to be the catalyst to this conversation, because maybe there's just one lost soul like I was 15 years ago that hears this conversation and it sheds a little light on their soul. Because if I didn't hear it, I wouldn't be here, and I know that. And I just can't say how much I appreciate you coming on and discussing this topic.
Thank you so much.
So there's your horn honking for you, SirGuy. So it does appear we have a slight delay, and that's why we keep talking over each other. Nonetheless, I think the last question I finally have for you is, what are some resources available for people that are curious about learning more?
Well, first of all, I would recommend Flag's book, The Forked Tongue.
I was already getting it.
Guide to Treating People Badly. Yes, that's an excellent book. It deals with so many aspects, not just the interrogation, mindfulness, but the whole psychology behind what it is that we do, and how to do it ethically, being serious about it, and in our seriousness, finding fun. I think that's one of the best books I could think of. I learned a lot from watching interrogation scenes from certain movies. One of the ones that immediately springs to mind is Marathon Man. The scene between Dustin Hoffman and Laurence Olivier. Just the whole thing, the way that scene is crafted is spectacular when it comes down to interrogation role play. There's another movie called Closet Land with Alan Rickman and what's her name? Marjorie Stowe. It's only the two of them. She's a writer of children's books in a totalitarian regime, and she is taken to be interrogated. She's abducted, taken to be interrogated because they believe her book her children's book has hidden meanings, that are harmful to the state. The way that Alan Rickman crafts his interrogation, he actually makes her believe he's different people. It's a wonderful movie. I pull interrogation scenes from a variety of movies and look at them. I see how they craft the anticipation. I see how they do the bait and switch. They tell you I've got this hot iron and it's so hot it's going to feel cold, and but they feel this cold. It's for the Punisher movies. They feel this cold sensation, but they smell meat burning. We had something on our grill. It's but it's the whole psychological aspect of it, the misdirection. That's where I got a lot of my ideas for scenes from. Of course, I do presentations, so there's I'm a resource as well, and I mean, you can find things online, but like I said, I prefer looking at some of those movies that use interrogation in a psychological way, because it helps me set scenarios for how I deal with my things.
Mm-hmm.
And I would definitely start with flags.
Yeah, it's crazy, almost 16 years later, there's no other really good resource on what we're discussing here. Mm-hmm. Most of what we have is based off of physical action, not on the psychological aspects that we're discussing, like interrogation. And I agree. I mean, I've probably read The Forked Tongue conservatively 100 times. When I got the revisited version, I actually cried the first 50 pages, because the first Forked Tongue, it didn't have all the stories of the individuals that Flag touched and how impactful he was, right? It was very touching to hear that somebody was so dark, was so loved, so appreciated. Other than his book, I don't have a lot of resources. I think that when it comes to mitigating some of the risk, I think that, reading Flag's book, Power and Practice, is an old podcast that was put on by Soul Hunter, and some of Flag's old presentations. I don't recall if there's a specific one on interrogation, but I do know that Tatsumi does one on CNC. Once again, all about ideas or ideology around what we do,
right?
Not necessarily how to do it. And I think the movies, that's where the movies are good references for the physical side of interrogation. The bright light, the smoking cigarette, the lack of daylight, the good cop, bad cop, to get those ideas. I love that you pull from movies. Mm-hmm. I do it as well. One of them I think about when it comes to interrogation, because for me, a lot of an interrogation, or a lot of this darker play, as I'm going to phrase it, is parallels with mindfucks. And the number one movie that I'd recommend, if you really want to learn how to do mindfucks, is Inception. And they even teach you can't lie to your victim, because then they'll know. You have to create that environment that they lie to themselves. And as far as interrogation, I actually have a little FetLife writing on it. I'm a geek, and I was raised in the 90s, and I have this huge fascination for the Matrix, and I really, really want to be Agent Smith, and I really need someone to be my Trinity. Anybody that knows anything about those movies knows that Trinity will never, ever give up Neo, but I want to see if she will with me, right? But I think in closing, It's the probably the most important thoughts I can think, at least from my perspective, and I'd like to ask yours as well. If I just had to say one, it would be focus on the person, not the process. You're more than welcome to give one, but what would you think would be some of the key talking points from this conversation?
I think it has to be responsibility. You know, we have to be responsible for ourselves and for the people that we're with. Again, what you said, being into the person, not the act, not the process, but the person. When you get in, because the idea is to get into them. And when you get into them, you get back what's inside of them. I think those are the key things. And, you know, not doing harm. You know, you can hurt, but not harm. And understanding that everything that we do is ethical within parameters. And we won't even play or pretend that we're violating any of those parameters. Because as you said in the beginning, don't lie. And that's the important thing. Once we show ourselves to be responsible and trustworthy in this, we can explore a depth of it that we will not be able to explore otherwise.
Well, I would just like to bring it to everybody's attention that Soul Hunter was nice enough to actually listen to this episode. Was not prepared for that. Thank you. But he offered a recommendation, and he says Closet Land is a great guide as well. So I am currently looking it up right now.
Right.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. It's the one with
when you were saying the movies.
And Madeline Stowe, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Perfect.
Right.
I'm looking them up. I actually had to take a reel when you were talking about the movies because I was taking notes and I didn't hear the title of the one. So now I have it. Great.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's get this wrapped up. The last question I got for you is, where can we find you? You got any books? You got any presentations coming up? This is the time to honk your own horn, SirGuy.
Okay. So my website is www.SirGuyBDSM.com. The types of presentations that I give are listed there, and where is SirGuy will tell you where I'm going to be at. I'm going to be at South Plains Leather Fest. I'm going to be in March. I'm going to be at Leather Leadership Conference in March. And there's some other things coming up that people are negotiating right now. But if you watch my website or on FetLife, I'm SirGuy, one word, capital S, capital G. I post things on my page there as well.
Great. Well, I went ahead and threw your website in the comment section for the live, and then it is in the show description. I'd like to come see one of your presentations, and I already kind of wanted to come to South Plains, so looks like we might get a 2 birds, 1 stone type of thing. Nonetheless, I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight to this episode of the Dominance Dialogues. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, be sure to subscribe and share. And as always, stay curious, stay intentional, and keep the dialogue going. Until next time, we'll see you.